Afghanistan.
Now, an independent Afghan MP said the other day, Dawood Sultanzoy, he said the other day that 10,000 individuals are deserting from the army every year. He said the figures in the police force are even worse. He said that so many policemen are on drugs. He said, how can you work with a police force where so many of the members of it are addicted to drugs and stoned? Stoned, his word, not mine.
Yeah.
Now, this is the reality, and yet the Americans have said in the last few days they want to double the size of the Afghan security forces and make them effective by 2011. Well, how on earth is that going to happen?
Firstly, look at the progress. We've already got 90,000 members of the Afghan army. I'm confident that we can increase to 134,000 by the end of next year. One of the conditions we laid down for our troop uplift was that Karzai would deploy 5,000 troops to Helmand province so that we could work alongside them, and significant recruits month on month. If I'm candid, I think the progress within the armed forces is positive. I think the progress within the police, there's still a lot more to do. And you do have a drugs problem within Afghanistan. Again, in terms of the progress, after years of battling against poppy cultivation, for the last 2 years, there's been a very welcome downturn. And in Helmand, that's been in part because of the wheat distribution programme that Governor Mangal, with our support, has led. But I'm not going to say to you that there aren't challenges working with the Afghan forces. But if we're to face up to the insurgency, if we're to protect ourselves, and at the same time we want our troops to come home, I don't think we've got an alternative but to seek to work with them.
That is a complicated message to deliver to your own people who you are sending into harm's way. And let's just switch to think about their current conditions. Are you prepared to acknowledge to me that as the fighting in Afghanistan has intensified, the Ministry of Defence has, up to now, failed to respond quickly enough in terms of ensuring the right resources go to the right places at the right time?
No, I wouldn't say that. If you look, look at the statement from the Chief of the Defence Staff last week, where he said in terms of equipment, if that's what you're talking about, the level of equipment we're providing to our troops is the best in his 40 years' experience. We recognised 3 years ago when we went into Helmand province that we needed to do more. That's why, whether it's helicopters, whether it's personal equipment, whether it's vehicles, there has been a substantial uplift.
Well, you tell me that, but I also know that your ministry, the Ministry of Defence, is sitting on an internal advisory report commissioned from Bernard Gray, who's a special advisor, it was, inside the department, which says, and I'm quoting, that there has been incompetence in the equipment programme, and it has, quote, been harming our ability to conduct difficult current operations.
One, we actually commissioned Bernard. We asked him to come in and do that report, and we have made clear what is within that report. If you're talking about procurement within the Ministry of Defence, this is an issue that goes back over decades. We have made significant improvements, but I'm the first to admit, and the Secretary of State will, that we need to do more.
Well,
that's why we asked Bernard to come in, and why we're responding to it.
And that's why I asked you at the beginning of this phase of the interview whether you're prepared to acknowledge that there have been mistakes. And he talks about incompetence. Would you recognise there has been some incompetence? I mean, we can talk specifically about spare part supplies, which MPs have criticised. We can talk about particular armoured vehicles which were sent out to Afghanistan and were shown to be ineffective. Would you just here and now say, yeah, there have been some very serious mistakes?
If you're asking me, has the record over the years been perfect? No, it hasn't. And procurement is a difficult challenge because it's not just wish fulfillment. It's saying, how are you going to source the supplies? How do you ensure that people are adequately trained? Where do you get the spares from? How do you do that economically and efficiently? And that is a difficult process. Are we doing it better today than we were 10 years ago? In my view, emphatically, yes. Have we still got further improvements to make? Yes, we have, which again is why we asked Bernard to undertake that work.
Well, let's be specific about one area, because many of the troops who are going to Afghanistan are particularly concerned about what are called the IEDs, the explosive devices put on roadsides, which have been so damaging. Back in the summer, before he left his post, Sir Richard Dannett, head of the army, said that he had a shopping list, and at the top of his shopping list was a much greater resourcing for 24/7 aerial surveillance, so that from the skies, maybe by drones and other means, the military had capacity to see the Taliban and the other Islamist fighters laying their devices on roadsides. Can you tell me here and now that you have fulfilled his wish list and got that 24/7 aerial surveillance?
Well, before General Dannett undertook that visit, we had already, last April, with the statement that the Prime Minister made, based upon the advice from the service chiefs, identified that we needed to do much more in terms of tackling IEDs. They are the most ruthless threat that our forces are facing. That's why we've committed £101 million this year.
But what's the answer to my question?
The answer is yes, we are doing that.
Well, you say you're doing it, but
yep.
Is it in place now? Because the troops on the ground want to know it's working now. Not that you've got a plan to make it work in the future, because we know from the report of Bernard Gray that sometimes plans take years to implement.
No, look, I was out in Afghanistan last July, and I saw for myself and I've got to be careful here, right, because what I say to you is not only heard by you and your viewers, it's heard by the Taliban, right? And that's not ducking the question. There is no issue where there is a greater ownership of the problem and determination to deliver the goods. And I am convinced that we are doing everything possible.
So when MOD officials on August 19th said to the Daily Telegraph that there were serious problems with staffing this intelligence and reconnaissance commitment, is known as the ISTAR program, they said that in certain parts of the department they were 40% short of staff. You're saying all of those problems have been solved since August? No,
look, I'm not going to say to you, look, you know, delivering the equipment that you need to the front line, as I said earlier, is not just a process of wish fulfillment. Have the resources been delivered? Yes. Have the staff been trained? Are they being trained? Yes. Have we delivered a 200-strong force to Afghanistan, both scientists who are working on this in theatre, troops who are carrying out the checks and the detections? Yes, we are. And to put that into context, 15 months ago, we were detecting 40%, only 40% of the IEDs on the ground. Today, the figure is 80%. The problem, however, is that the Taliban are planting more of them. Now, you know, we are doing more. We will do more into the future. But you can't guarantee against a ruthless enemy like the Taliban.
But it is, to say the least, a little difficult for you, isn't it, when Sir Richard Dannett, who so recently was the head of the army, says that it has for him over recent years been frustrating trying to get Prime Minister Gordon Brown to put the right resources into Afghanistan. Dannett admittedly said he's now beginning to get it, but, quote, my goodness, it's taken a long time.
Look, I've got the greatest respect for General Dannett. In the time that I worked with him, we got on very well. The difficulty I've got is I know General Dannett's responsibility for decisions, and I'm not going to get into the business of criticising him, because I think once the ministers and the senior military fall out publicly, that is enormously damaging for the military.
But it's getting close to that,
well,
isn't it?
No, it's not. If you actually listen to the views of the senior military within this building, they will tell you that they do not want to conduct these debates in public. What they do know, and that's why people like Sir Jock Stirrup have gone on the record to say that we have the best equipment that we've had in his 40 years. They recognise the progress that we're making, but all of us know that we need to do more.
Let's talk about one other aspect of this briefly. That is, it's called the covenant. It's the notion that the public and the government has a duty to our armed forces, in response for them putting their lives on the line in places like Afghanistan, a duty to offer them the very best of treatment, the very best sort of respectful behaviour toward them, in essence, to look after them and their families. Do you believe we're upholding that commitment as a government and as a society?
Well, let me firstly deal with government, and there's no greater responsibility that I and my colleagues bear than ensuring we properly treat our service personnel, their families,
and would
veterans.
you accept we haven't in recent years?
No. Well, if you want to go back into the distant past, I don't think we were doing enough.
I want to go back to just the last couple of years. National Audit Office reports about substandard housing, terrible housing conditions for many military personnel, looking at underpayments to some military personnel. Going back just to the last year, £60 million worth of underpayments for special extra bonus payments that were supposed to go to military personnel. And, of course, it may be a small thing, but it seems to many people to be symptomatic. The government, in terms of the Prime Minister's office, sending condolence letters, sometimes years late, to families who've lost loved ones in Afghanistan. This adds up to many people to a government that doesn't care.
Well, look, people make all sorts of criticisms of the Prime Minister. The vast majority of people, in my experience, credit him, if for nothing else, credit him for the real concern he has for our military and the fact that he goes out of his way to communicate with bereaved families. I think that's the right thing to do.